Welcome back to the 24th floor alongside Ruben Diaz and Locked On Grizzlies host Joe Mullinax.
Yeah, we already talked about the number 3 pick, right, and all the pressure around that, who you should take, what that means. But Memphis has another important first-round decision to make at number 16, which, although it doesn't sound as sexy as number 3, it's still a great pick.
This is the one pick that I'm actually the most excited about because a lot of times when you look at who's some of the best players in the NBA, it comes from the middle of the draft, such as Kawhi Leonard, Giannis. So you know what, Joe, when you look at where this roster currently stands, what should the Grizzlies realistically be trying to accomplish with pick number 16?
You mentioned earlier in the show that Zach Kleiman has never traded back, but he certainly has traded up before. And I do think that we need to keep that in mind. I would be surprised if the Grizzlies pick at 16. I think they make a move, try to get into the second half of the lottery, maybe a little bit further back than that, because I do think that they'll have a guy or two that they want to make sure that they jump in front of other teams to try to select. Somebody like a Cameron Carr. I know our mutual buddy, DeMichael Cole, is big on Cam Carr, and he looked pretty darn good at the NBA Draft Combine. Do you guys remember anybody else who looked pretty darn good at the Draft Combine maybe around this time last year? Oh, yeah, Cedric Howard looked pretty darn good at the NBA Draft Combine. So I think somebody like a Cam Carr who can knock down the 3, can defend, has good wingspan, somebody like that. A Mo Johnson of Michigan has also had a bit of a move up the draft board rankings, trying to restock and rebuild that front court depth. That, to me, would be a major focus, especially if you're not really as happy with the point guards that could be available there in the middle of the first round. There's still going to be plenty of wings, plenty of bigs. Those are just 2 of the guys that I have my eye on if Memphis picks at 16. But again, I would be surprised if they do. I think they're going to trade up a little bit or at least try to.
So on the mock draft stuff, it's got them taking Christian Anderson from Texas Tech as point guard, which I like that guy too. Which would feed into the narrative that maybe you're moving on from John Morant. You go pick a point guard in that 16 spot, somebody that can start to hold down the fort a little bit, a young guard you can build and develop. What you're saying is that may not actually come to fruition if things go kind of typical, like the history of the Grizzlies, I should say.
Yeah. And I think that, again, the point guard position, you've got Ty Jerome on your roster. You've got Scottie Pippen Jr. on your roster. You've got Walter Clayton Jr. on your roster, at least for now. You have multiple point guards that are in that mix. I don't know that you have to reach for a point guard in this particular draft. The Memphis Grizzlies in this rebuild, it's not going to be something where they are going to fix everything overnight. That's just not realistic. I expect the Grizzlies to be much more competitive next season, but much more competitive from where they were is not really that much of a jump, if that makes sense. If we're talking about the play-in this time, in 9 months from now, I think that's something to be really excited about. If you're the Memphis Grizzlies, you're back in the mix and you're improving, building, and with the likely changes to the NBA draft lottery that are coming, you have plenty of assets still going into next year. If you're trying to find a point guard, try to solidify that position if you're not happy with the young guys that you currently have on your roster. I think that they can certainly go best player available, but they can also afford, I posted on X the other day, if Nate Ament tumbles out of the lottery, a Tennessee Volunteer, and he's sitting there around 15 or 16, I wouldn't hate that pick. We're talking about a 6'10" wing. He had ebbs and flows at Tennessee. There might be some flaws to his game, but again, he's young and he has a frame. Imagine a starting 5. That's Ty Jerome, but then beyond that, Cedric Howard at the 2, Ament at the 3, Boozer at the 4, and Edey at the 5. That's one of the biggest teams in the National Basketball Association. And that, again, not a perfect selection in terms of there's a lot of room for growth with Ament, but you're looking for an upside swing there. And if you're going with a really talented but safe thing at Cam Boozer at 3, taking that upside swing at 16 makes a little more sense to me if they pick there.
Oh, well, first, I know you can't see my reaction, but I just shook my head at Ament because everything you just said about Ament is the same thing people said about Zachary Ricochet. And you see what he's doing for the Hawks. They're basically
he was the number
the
1 overall pick. We're talking about the middle of the draft.
But they're essentially the same type of player. The only difference is Ament is American. And it's just like, Ament, I think he's good, but it's just like, you're talking about having him start. Like looking at a world where he starts, I would much rather take a flyer on Allen Graves, a guy who just announced that he's going to stay in the draft instead of go back to school and go to Santa Clara or hit the portal. I think Allen Graves is this year's Cedric Coward, a guy who you look at be like, maybe he should go play for a more blue blood in college, but he's going to bet on himself and go into the draft and be a really good player. What do you think about Allen Graves?
I like Allen Graves. I don't know that he's as good as Cedric Coward. I think there's some holes in his game that didn't necessarily, when I look at Graves, I see more like a Boris Diaw type. And don't get it twisted, Boris Diaw had a pretty good NBA career, right? Like, I'm not hating on that. But I don't see a guy that's going to come in. He's more like a Kyle Anderson type to me. That's the kind of vibe I get when I look at a Graves. And I want to stress, I would prefer Cam Carr. DeMichael talked me into Cam Carr. That's my guy, I think, at that second pick. I'm just saying that if you're going to go with a Cam Boozer, who, again, I think it's crazy to say he's a finished product and he's not even 19 yet. But if we're talking about Cam Boozer being the safe bet, going for the upside swing, even if it's not a Met, if there's another type of upside swing, like somebody like a Corey, the point guard from Stanford.
Oh, I love a Corey.
That's a guy that has been rising up draft boards. That's a guy that has a long wingspan. He's only about 6'3", but he's got a 6'8" wingspan. That's an upside swing type of pick too. Those types of guys are the guys I would think about at 16. It doesn't have to be a Met. He's just one. If he is there, it would be interesting to think on.
He's going to get Kleiman fired.
Do the Grizzlies not need more shooting? Like, you were talking about true three-point shooting, especially the way the NBA has started to, has gravitated towards the three-point line. Even the bigs are out so much. Would it not make sense to maybe look at a true shooter at that 16 or maybe even later on in the draft? But if you could move up and get you somebody like Burries from Arizona or something, does that help you in any situation?
Oh, sure. I think that's the first thing they do. I think they try to package 16, 32, and I mentioned all those point guards. They're not all going to play, so maybe you try to take the salary of a Walter Clayton Jr. You take the money of another player. We forget that they have this massive traded player exception that was created in the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade. They can take back, I think it's $28.4 million in salary. So that is an asset that they can use to try to either bring in more draft capital as they continue this rebuild, or to bring in another draft pick, or to try to bring in a veteran player, somebody that could be trying to cut cap money. There's so many flexibilities that they have within this draft and so many different ways that they can twist and turn. I absolutely could see them trying to get up to 6, 7, or 8 and to take somebody like a Burries. But again, Cam Carr is probably going to shoot, Carr shot really well in college, 37%. We're talking about guys, I haven't brought him up yet, but Dalen Swain, not the best three-point shooter in college, but he's been rising up draft boards. It could be a good two-way wing out of Texas. A Corey, who we were talking about a moment ago, out of Stanford, he shot 36% from three at Stanford, but he shot 83% on his free throws, and free throw percentage is oftentimes a good indicator of what they're going to do from the three-point line later on in their careers. So there's lots of pieces that you could go with, whether you trade up, do something of that nature to bring in some other type of contract using that pick. They can do a lot of different things to bring in that shooting. I don't think that's something they don't need. But if Cam Boozer is the pick at the 3, this is a guy that shot 39% in college from beyond the arc, and he did it on a pretty good clip and pretty good volume. They're going to be bringing in a three-point shooter if Boozer is the pick, whereas Caleb Wilson does a lot of things well. One of the glaring weaknesses in his game is the lack of a three-point shot, at least when he was at UNC.
All right, we got to take another quick break. So we didn't got the 3, we didn't did 16, but the Grizzlies still have another decision ahead in the second round.
Yeah, we're going to talk about pick number 32 when we come back. Now, again, that doesn't sound as sexy, but there's still a lot of talent in this draft.
Hey, Jalen Wells was taken in the second round. Who knows? We'll talk about it.